We move to this. The African Union has condemned the constitutional change in Burkina Faso. This after military officers ousted junta leader Paul-Henri Damiba. Addressing the nation yesterday evening, the military officer said Damiba's removal is due to his inability to deal with the worsening armed uprising in the West African country. Lieutenant Colonel Damiba's removal comes just 8 months after he came into power in a coup. The military has named Captain Ibrahim Traore as the new leader. Let's now get more analysis on this development with Dr. Charles Sinkala, who is an international relations consultant. Dr. Sinkala, a pleasure to have you on the program this evening. Firstly, tell us what is at the heart of this conflict and these attempts for a coup.
Yes, good evening to your viewers, and thank you so much for having me. Yes, it's quite unfortunate. We thought that we are coming out from coup d'etats in the South Sahel there, especially Burkina Faso. The last coup d'etat in January was justified by of the insecurities and as well as the mushrooming insurgencies. And the core of the new leader, Damiba, who has just now been set aside, promised to restore the peace and the rule of law to the civilians. And that hasn't come forth as the fights continued on whatever which they promised to restore in that region. And I think this has exacerbated the conflicts and the call for him to be removed. And I think I can safely say that also his speech from UNGA 77 last week at the United Nations also triggered the other opponents. We must remember that in that region we have Russia and France who are fighting for the control of that region, and as well as the colonial heritage of that region. And him announcing publicly that he's happy with the Russian Wagner group, which is a better devil than the other ones as well, must have provoked what has happened this week.
Now, surely this also prompts fresh political uncertainty in this troubled country.
Yes, of course. And the efforts as well from the ECOWAS has bared no fruits because of their bias and involvement with those who are actually perpetrating to rule that nation. And that Burkina Faso has to be ruled by a civilian. They should have called sooner than later the civilian rule in terms of immediately after the last coup d'etat in the last January, to allow for fresh elections and as well as a political dispensation to take place. They should have called for elections, and that was prolonged and delayed and prolonged and delayed, and so much anxiety for the people in terms of having a fair choice of having an elected leader. And as well, I can also mention that it was wrong for the military to declare themselves as the president of that country, because the constitution of Burkina Faso, when it was restored, you can only elect somebody as the head of state and president of government by an electoral vote. But them declaring through the coup d'etat was also a challenge, especially from civil society and other members of society in Burkina Faso.
Now, it's also important to note that this is the second coup this year and comes after junior officers toppled a junta leader, saying he had certainly failed to fight jihadist attacks in this deeply poor and restive West African nation. Tell us a bit more about Burkina Faso and the state of that country.
Yes, I think the sector of Burkina Faso would like to control their citizens by military rule, and I think some sectors of society they are very much against that move. They would like peace to be restored through the governance of the political dispensation, through elections and the elections votes. And yes, some military officials as well, they might not agree with the majority of the military commander, the former commander, what he was trying to pursue. And this also shows that he was not actually working with the rest of the military. He was working with those people who would like to have the share, especially those I've mentioned between Russia and as well as France to get control, either to supply arms and ammunition to that nation or whatever other prospects of in terms of trade that they are doing. Burkina Faso's spend on military is in excess of 700 million to almost close to $1 billion annually. And the call for them to compete, who supplies those military budget to them, has also brought in to who is behind or in charge of Burkina Faso. And I think the most likely what we saw from the press conference earlier was basically simply a word betrayal. That our leader has betrayed us. And this is what we never thought that he would govern us in terms of this. We thought that the military would take over to control and protect the people from the mushrooming Islamist insurgencies, and as well as taking the political or military situation into civilian rule.
Now, you've touched a bit on the response from ECOWAS, and of course this is the Economic Community of West African States regional bloc. It has condemned in the strongest possible terms this latest seizure of power, calling it very inappropriate at a time when progress was being made for a return to constitutional order by the 1st of July 2024. What do you make of this response?
I do not agree with that statement that there was a lot of progress which was being made in terms of restoring the rule of law in that nation of Burkina Faso. We could see that leading to this gunshots were fired near the president's palace, and as well the instability, both the political, economical instabilities in that country, and as well as the suspension of the representatives from the ECOWAS in Burkina Faso, and many others was leading to this. This was a significant sign that there was no progress in terms of what they were doing. And I think if there was any progress which was going, the progress should have been made immediately when they announced earlier in January that they shall take at least 3 months to restore civilian rule in that country, and they postponed time and after again. We are almost close to the end of the year, and it is very difficult to say that there was progress that we did not see. In fact, Burkina Faso and the junta were not even in good terms. They differed on many occasions, and as well that ECOWAS has been compromised. They also call for that different body, such as either SADC, can be exchanged to oversee the negotiations in that region. That can work, going forward in terms of conflicts within those regions. We also, from the southern part of Africa, if we have any conflicts and we need mediation, we're not limited to only using our SADC bloc. We can also invite ECOWAS or the Central African, body, or whichever that can mediate the conflict, just to rule out the biasness in terms of these mediations.
Let's get your thoughts on the response from further afield. The European Union expressed concern at these unfolding events, while the United States called for a return to calm and a restraint by all actors.
It's a mere lip service, from the international community to respond such as in that way. I expect, especially the United Nations, when they talked about peace in the last United Nations General Assembly meeting, which they had with heads of states from different parts of the world, they emphasized the need of peace, especially on the African continent. Not only as they dominated the conflict within Russia and Ukraine, but they said that there is need for aggressive and robust approach in terms of the coup d'etats on the continent and how they can respond to such threats which threatens the governance and the call for democracy on the continent. And them mayor is saying that they condemn the coup d'etat. Even ECOWAS, that was their statement, that they condemn the coup d'etat. It does not help, or actually exacerbates to the situations to be escalated. We expect that the United Nations, through the general security and the peace, through their arms and ammunition, and as well as their guns from the AU, they must make a robust involvement into these regions to ensure that the control of these nations, such as Burkina Faso, is absolutely by the government and of the people. Burkina Faso is 60% controlled by the government. 40%, which is a large number, is controlled by those who does not go for the rule of law, as well as the mushrooming Mitini within the army, has also been posing a big threat in terms of that. I think the international community must really look at how they approach and address these issues, such as the ones which happen in the Western Sahara and the Southern Sahara, especially in that region.
Dr. Charles Sinkala, thank you very much for your time. We bring you more news from the continent when we return.